Everyone, I'm Melanie Deziel. I'm the author of the Content Fuel Framework and Prove It, exactly how modern marketers earn trust. And the best advice I ever got, I was talking about sort of imposter syndrome and, feeling like you belong in different spaces that we make our way through. And somebody told me that if you just act like you belong there, then people will believe you. And it's sort of like not a fake it till you make it, but just like, decide that you belong in that space, walk with confidence, and people just seem to believe it.
I love that. How long ago was that, Mel, that you learned that?
Maybe like, oh God, I have COVID time warp, so I'm like manually adding additional years now. Like, it was probably like 2017 ish. Like five, what is
Cool.
that? Five, six?
6 years. Yeah. Holy crap, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Wow. So with that, right? So Content Field Framework came out in what, 19 or 20, right?
2020, like
20.
hours before we all went into
Right.
lockdown.
That's right. Yeah. So that's right. Wow. 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 So that's good. So that happened before that. I mean, did that help you have the confidence to write the book, or how did that help you?
Yeah, so I mean, a couple of things. I think, I have been very blessed and lucky to, from a timing standpoint, to have excelled quite a bit for my age. But I often find myself in these rooms, whether it's like pitching for business or, at a speaker's dinner or whatever the case may be. And I would have these thoughts where I'm like, gosh, these people have kids who are not much younger than I am, or, who I'm closer in age perhaps to their kids than to them, and it gave me like crippling imposter syndrome. And so I think a lot of it was more just about like the way you carry yourself and sort of, because I never doubted my skills. It's not like I was like, oh, I'm not good enough to be here, but it's like why me? How did I get in here? Who let me in? And so it I think it helped combat some, I don't know if it's like confidence, self-confidence, or just like self-assuredness. I think like feeling like, yeah, you know what, I do belong here, and I can be present and contribute and speak up and things like that.
Excellent. Yeah, I've had times where that's been a challenge for me too. So I totally understand how that is. So before, let's rewind, like even before that book, right?
Yeah.
You encourage us all to think like a journalist. Now, do you still think that's good advice, or what do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, all recent politics and authoritarian concerns aside, journalism at its core, the job is to serve the audience, right? Like, it's not about being famous, it's not about you being the story, it's about being someone who collects the facts and helps other people understand it so they can make informed decisions. Like, you are there as an extension of your audience. And so I think for a lot of marketers and sales pros, that's great advice, because it's very easy for us to get stuck in, thinking about our product, what we're selling, or our personal brand, and just forget that, we're really here to serve those folks. And so that basic mindset, I think, is actually still relevant, and relevant in a lot of industries.
Yeah, I agree. I actually challenge salespeople to whenever they're feeling weird about sales or whatever, to replace sales and selling with serve and service, because
I love it.
that's our goal, right? That what to sell is to serve. So I believe
Yeah.
that 100%. But with that, right, we've got to prove it now because there's a lot more competition. There's a lot that. So new book, congratulations. Exactly
Yeah.
how modern marketers earn trust. Prove it with our friend Phil M. Jones, which is
Yeah.
super fun. So
Yeah.
talk to me about the timing of this book, right? This came out what, late last year, I think.
Yeah.
So
October.
prove it. Why is it even more relevant now than it was maybe even 5 years ago?
Yeah, so it comes from sort of a combination of a few things, just, hitting all at the same time, like the perfect storm. So one of those being that the first book was all about how to come up with content ideas, and then the next sort of natural question that comes after that is like, well, which ones should I focus on? Like, okay, I got them now. Like, how do I pick? What's the priority, right? And so I found myself having a lot of those kinds of conversations around, well, it should be the ones that your audience needs to trust you. It should be the ones that best prove your business case. It should be the ones that help you differentiate where you're telling the truth and your competitors aren't. And I didn't have like a framework for giving that. And from a lot of my work, it's very structured. There's organization, there's systems, acronyms, and so I kind of had this challenge for myself. How do I make this information easy for people to understand so we can answer that next question? Um, but yeah, in terms of it being timely, we also have study after study coming out, and this is only going to get worse, I'm sure, that shows that people are more skeptical than they've ever been before. And with, I mean, when we started this conversation, it was about fake news, right? And now it's like AI deep fakes that are, generating images that don't exist and videos that don't exist and faces super. I mean, it is very difficult to know what is real, what to trust, what is trickery. And so we see this incredible rise in skepticism in consumers and like people across the board. So if we want people to believe us, we now have to earn it. Like there was a time when people would just believe. Surely if they put that in a commercial or, on TV, it's real, right? But that's not the case anymore. People default to doubt. And so if we want to earn that trust from an increasingly skeptical audience, like you've got to bring the receipts.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. People default to doubt. I think that's such an interesting way to put it. And certainly, what I'm seeing as well. I mean, a lot of people, when, in sales and leadership and marketing, people are like, I'm not really sure if this person is telling me the truth or not. So,
Hmm.
no, like the benefit of the doubt is in many cases gone now. We're like, yeah, but I'm not going
Yeah.
to trust but verify. I'm going to verify, and I'm going to verify with a source that I trust
Hmm.
instead of a source that you trust. And you talk in the book about, the review sites
Hmm.
being a good source for content that actually proves it. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, so we see again these same studies that talk about consumer doubt and skepticism talk about, well, who do they trust? Like what do they actually trust if they're so skeptical? And one of the things we see is that in most categories, pretty much across the board, generally the top trusted thing is people just like me. So that could be family and friends, it could be a fellow business owner, it could be, a fellow parent with kids the same age. Whatever it is, people like me is often the top trusted thing. It's the reason why, whenever moms are building like a registry for their baby shower, you're asking other moms like, what do I need to have? What's not useful? What is useful? And same thing, you're shopping for, you need somebody to do your floors, or you're trying to get a new car. Well, how do you like that car? You want to know from people like you, what's the truth? What's your experience? And so when we look at like review sites or ratings, any place where we have consumers sharing their experience and it's coming straight from them, like not edited by the brand. That's the really key thing, right? So product reviews count. These review sites, whether it's Yelp or Dealer Rater or whatever else, um, people feel like that's more trustworthy. It's coming from people like me, and so that can encouraging that, and especially when you have customers, clients who are super satisfied, like encouraging them to do that in a way that's outside of your control, because we all have testimonials and stuff. But I think we've all had that experience of you're looking at a website and they're like, this product is wonderful, James B. And you're like, yeah, that's definitely made up. There's no James B, that person's not real, So I think if it's coming straight from the consumers, social media, all of these things, it becomes more believable because we believe the brand hasn't had as much of an influence in changing what those words might say.
Wow. So is that still true when we're seeing review you everywhere? Like we're being pushed to review, review, review. And I mean that what was it? In automotive, right? It's the JC Power Award. But I gotta tell you, like I get hounded so hard every time you buy a car, every time you get the car serviced, like give us 5 stars, or if not, let us make it right. Well, I feel like, well, if I can't, if I almost don't want to say anything because seldom is it really 5 stars for me. So what is that? What does that change things at all?
So I think there's a couple of things when it comes to reviews. We do tend to see the far ends of the spectrum, right? People don't generally leave a review that says like 3.5 stars. It was okay, like that. You don't feel compelled. It's not important for you. But when you have a terrible experience, or when you have an amazing experience, we often see that distribution where it's like the 5 stars are there's a bunch of them, and then the 1 stars there's a bunch, right? There's not usually people don't feel super strongly about like threes and fours. So you definitely do see that distribution, but we also see that when a product has only good reviews, like it's only 5 stars, the doubt creeps in again because you think, well, it can't possibly be perfect and right every single time. I cannot possibly believe that no one's ever had a single complaint. So actually having a 4.5 rating, or something slightly under 5, and having some of that negative review present is actually better for you, because it shows I'm more likely to believe a 4.5 because there are negative experiences there to balance it out. So, we definitely see that distribution, but I think to your point, because people don't tend to review as much in that middle ground, it is something to keep in mind as you're doing your own research. Like, there's probably, if I'm looking for an okay experience, like this is not the end of the world. I just need a car wash place. Like, I don't need the best car wash place in the county. Then, you probably don't have to have quite as much concern.
Good to hear. Good to know. So with that, one of the other ones that you talk about in the book, which is awesome, is all about proving connection, and that's a hard one for folks, I think, because a lot of times we have affiliation, I would say, without
Yeah.
connection. We're part of an association, we're part of some organization, and we're like, yeah, but I'm not sure that I'm connected. So what's the difference between affiliated and connected, and how do we prove that we're really connected?
That is a really good distinction, and I would love to spend more time kind of I'm a words person, so kind of like digging into the
Yeah,
two and seeing like where can we draw the lines, because I think you're right, a lot of people use them like relationships, connection, we use it interchangeably, sort of as we're just moving through life. But the way we mean connection in the book is when you have a relationship that is core to your identity, right? So not just, I don't know, like I have neighbors, they exist, they're real, but like that's not really relevant to you in terms of the expertise that I'm putting forth, or to one of my clients determining, they're not like, well, tell me about your relationships with your neighbors. Like that's not probably on their criteria for hiring me. So that's really where the difference is, I think, where what are those relationships? What are those connections that are important to the image that you present, the promises that you make, the expectations you set, because those are the ones where you're going to want to be really focused on capturing and presenting evidence of those. So again, and sometimes that evidence comes in the form of reviews like we were just talking about. In the book I talk about Kathy Reed, a woman that she's a car salesperson. She sold my mom a car in 97, and she's been like our go-to gal since then. But when you look at her reviews on a site like Dealer Rater, you see the connection where people are saying like, yeah, I had a sleeping toddler, or I had a toddler and a sleeping newborn when I came to pick up my vehicle, and she ran back and forth so I didn't have to take my kids out of the car. Like that's a level of connection with your customers, of going the extra mile, that you can see that differently from, everyone's going to say, I care for my customers, I'm committed to making it a great experience. But when you hear that, the true connection coming out, it makes a big difference. So there's a lot of ways to prove that, a lot of different types of evidence you could use, but you definitely want to be focused on not just any connection or any affiliations, loose relationships you might have, but those that are really core to what you're promising, or the experience that you say you'll provide.
sure. So in a smaller business that's in a community, right? That would be the difference almost between the Bad News Bears having Chico's bail bonds that sponsors
Yeah.
you, and actually being a pillar of the community that actually might sponsor, the signups for Little League. Am I getting that
I
right, or am I off
it
base?
could be both, right? So it depends. Is the bail bond place, like, did they just hand over a check for $250 and call it a season, or did they host the party at the end of the season to celebrate the
Mm,
wins? Do they actually know the names of the kids that are on the team? Do they actually celebrate when, or even know if the team wins or loses, right? And that's where, again, you can't tell that from the outside. When I see that name on a jersey, like, I don't know how committed. Maybe it was just a check. Maybe somebody on the team's dad owns the place. You don't know that, so you need to see the evidence from the brand, and that could be, for a small business, this example we're saying, like, congratulate the team when they win on social media. Your community, that your customers are in the community, they know these things, right? Give a shout out to a kid on their birthday. I don't know, offer $1 off on the day that they win. Like, there's lots of ways you can prove that you're actually involved and connected with these folks, and not just like, my name happens to be on this list.
yeah, I love that. I love the deeper, the capital C, I would say, connection
Yeah.
instead of the little c. Let's get deeper and let's prove that out. And I do think that connectedness to alignment, if you will, between the brand and then the customer, as well as then the affiliation, if you will, right, the association,
Yeah.
perhaps, with that group. I think that's a good depth thing. So with that, Amel, there's so much here in this proving it. So when we think about trust, though, I didn't ask you to define this up
Mhm.
front, but talk to me a little bit about how we see that show up in in today's world, right? How do we know that we can trust someone beyond that connection?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's actually come up quite a few times recently where people are like, "What is the metric? Like, how many units of trust, and what are those units called?" Like we want something quantifiable. It's really tough to measure. I'm just being completely honest because it's so subjective, and because, as you said, a lot of the folks who are in the middle who do trust you, they just don't feel they're not your evangelists, right? It's hard to capture that. So there are definitely tools and things out there. You can have brand perception studies that are done by big firms with acronym names. You can do all those kinds of things. But I think at the end of the day, you will know if your customers believe the things about you that are most important for them to believe. And that signal comes through the things that they're saying and, on comment cards, on social media, to your waiters, like whatever the case may be. And it's also true in your numbers. People don't do business with people they don't trust. People don't buy or subscribe or download or sign up for or schedule a call with people they don't trust. So if you are focusing on this as a metric and your thought is, if I think of trust as sort of the super metric that precedes all other metrics, working there can only have a positive trickle down effect from that. So focusing on, you know, do my customers believe that I do what I say I'm going to do, or that I am who I say I am, that I deliver the results I say I will deliver? Do they think I'm going to deliver on my promises and meet the expectations that I myself have set? And again, that manifests in many different ways depending on your business type. I think it would be important for any business to say, how do you currently look at your business, and what metrics do you see as key success, sort of your key performance indicators, and how can you think about trust as sort of a funnel to serve that metric?
Mm. I like that. That super metric is a good one, and they are harder to measure, though. That's the wonderful as well as the challenging thing about
Yeah.
trust is, but you'll see it, you'll know it. It's often what people say when you're not in the room than it is what people say when you're standing right
Right.
next to them.
Right. Well, and I think, to your point earlier, like sales professionals are probably the closest to those conversations, right? Because you're hearing the objections, you're hearing the misunderstandings, you're hearing yeah, but I talked to another contractor and they said they would do that too, and then they didn't. You're hearing the doubt and skepticism firsthand, whoever that frontline customer facing person is, customer service or, liaisons, whether it's like your front desk staff or reception, like they're going to have the best insight into what do people actually believe about us and what do we need them to believe that they don't. Like everyone comes in here not
Mm.
expecting, XYZ, not knowing that we do this thing differently. We really need them to understand that this is important for us, that we do have a greener footprint compared to some of our competitors, for example. No one has any idea, so those kinds of things. I think the folks who are on the front line, who are talking to customers or clients all the time, will probably be able to feed some of that to you.
Definitely, definitely. Sales objections often are not even about you, it's about their
That's
history,
right.
what they've
Mhm.
experienced before. So the fact that they've been hosed over, right? The old snake oil person, the next person that sells them, they're like, whoa,
Yeah.
I'm a little skeptical here because I heard that just last week and that was not true.
Yeah. Well, and I always say too, like your negative reviews can be a real gift to you in that respect, because it often is. A lot of negative reviews come from mismatched expectations. I expected one thing and I didn't get it, right? So while it may be a bummer to get a 1 or a 2 star review, in reading that, and especially if you start to see trends, like that's a really good indication. Like clearly, we're setting the expectation that we will help them in less than 5 minutes. We don't actually promise that. So how do we adjust that? Where do we save 5 minutes? Where's this coming from that we need to address it and reset it to 10? Because that's the reality, right? And that's just a random example, but those negative reviews can really be such a rich source of information about what are the beliefs that you're not currently backing up. Like what are the things that they're not seeing the proof for.
Yeah, and diving into that and making those better and taking ownership over the fact that that isn't happening now, I think is super key. One of the let We could talk about lots of C's. One of the other C's in here that was surprising to me, though, I have to say, Mel, was the one of competence.
Yeah.
Like I just think competence is so like
Yeah.
foundational, and yet it's like so many people are not competent. So how do we, how do right? I
Yeah,
mean,
you're right.
how do we prove that? how do we prove that level of competence
Yeah.
when there are many numbers that can be skewed to make it appear like we're more competent than we are?
Yeah, so I mean, competence. It's funny. We put it last in the list of all the types of claims we talked about, the types of things we need folks to trust because of exactly that. It is kind of table stakes, and I think I even say in the book, like, if you're not competent on what you're doing, then like the rest of this is not helpful for you. Like, if you're just trying to be like a snake oil salesman, like this is not going to work well for you, because it is table stakes, and I don't believe there's any amount of marketing that can cover up a bad product or an inherently bad experience. Like it comes out in the wash. People know, people talk. And so, yeah, the competence is definitely table stakes. What we see with competence, though, is that again, we often assume that people know this by default. Like if a salesperson walks into the room or an individual and assumes, well, they already know we're amazing, they already know we're great at what we do, and you don't take the effort to actually talk about that, it's a huge missed opportunity. This just to give like a personal example, like for us as speakers, right? We walk into a room oftentimes and we're saying, hey, like here's what I know and here's what I could teach your audience, here's how I could serve for your team or your event. But if we don't make the point to say, I've spoken for all these other organizations, I've received these awards, I've worked at these companies with these clients, it seems like bragging, but really that's how you signal to them, like, I'm not just a person off the street who really wants a conference badge. Like, I have some relevant experience. I've done this type of work before. I've been trusted by other brands that you know and trust, folks maybe in your competitive set that's relevant. Um, and I think because we think it's table stakes, we sometimes forget that like that is also a claim that needs to be proved. It's not a given that you actually know what you're doing or you actually have experience or you've actually been doing this for 20 years. Nobody knows that. So make sure you're bringing that stuff forward.
Yeah. Well, I will just say this, Mel, you're really good at
Oh,
content
thank
and
you.
really good at marketing. So, and that's true. I've read both your books and enjoyed them. And I even bought your workbook, even though, so you got to make that a print version, by the
I
way, because I want a print copy.
I'm gonna see what
So,
I can do. I think like I said, when that book came out, we were sort of we had other concerns like surviving
oh, yeah.
and finding toilet paper. So now that we're through at least that part of the struggle, we could maybe see about getting a workbook printed.
There you go. Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, one more point that I want to talk about in the book, and that's, in my opinion, the biggest C that there is, and that's commitment. Right? We want people that are not just interested in solving our problems, but that are actually committed
Hmm.
to solving our problems. That are going to put the customer ahead of profit.
Yeah.
So, how do we signal commitment when we have so many people that aren't committed? Claim that they
Yeah.
are, or don't have anything but their own interested heart. How do we make sure that our customers know that we're committed?
And commitment is such a touchy one because it oftentimes when we're talking about a brand being committed, like either to their customers, to a cause, right, to like a movement or a particular social issue, or even like to their employees, to like paying a fair wage and equal pay and things like that. What we're often speaking to is not just a business practice, but part of that customer's identity. Like they buy because they want to support companies that do these things. They buy because they want to have a greener footprint, because they want to, XYZ. So when we are not following through or not providing that proof, it can be a major disconnect that's very difficult to overcome. If you buy a product you think is green and you find out it's not, like you're shattered like that, you broke my heart. Like that's intense, as opposed to like, oh, I thought that would be a great movie and it was kind of okay. It's like it's a little bit different because it's identity tied. And the same thing with customer service. Like we want to feel like we are important and we're being served and we're cared about. And so I mean, there's different ways you can prove that kind of thing, and I talk about in the book, using experts and witnesses, different people who can back up the truth of those claims. Is again, the people like me is one of the most compelling ways. But also bringing the demonstration and the documentation, like actually saying, "Here you go, you can see this commitment." That could be through customer stories where you're showing that commitment. The example I gave about our car sales gal earlier, Kathy running back and forth so that the mom with the sleeping baby didn't have to take her out of the car seat. Like that's commitment, right? Like that she's serious about providing a customized experience that suits your life and your needs. But that story needs to be told in order for people to know it, right? So that's really what the proving it is all about. No matter what it is that you're trying to prove, It's really about asking, how could we show our audience this instead of just tell them? Because we know they probably won't believe us if we just tell them. So let's be looking at all times for ways to show instead of tell.
I love that. We can show commitment more than we can tell commitment, and it's more believable then. I love that. That example of Kathy, as I was reading that, made me smile because I think back to my first car salesperson, may he rest in peace, but Starvin Marv was not the guy that you necessarily trusted with your life when you bought a car, but he was always available with something less than 500 bucks, which that was his
The
commitment to
convenience.
you.
Yeah, he was coming in with the
That's right.
convenience.
That's right. Yep, yep, yep. So cool. Well, Mel, again, the book is fantastic. It's Prove It, exactly how modern marketers earn trust. If you want to get to know more about Mel, check out storyfuel.co. But Mel, if people want to get started on the trust journey and they want to start moving towards proving it, what's the first or second step that they need to
Yeah.
take so they can start making this happen?
So if you want to do it sort of DIY style, whether you read the book or you don't, what you need to do first is do an audit of your own content, whether that's, signage in stores or menus or the sales materials you have, your website. Look at all the things you are saying and figure out what promises you are making. Because oftentimes that list is a lot longer than we think it is. Every time we're using an adjective and we're saying it's fast, like that's a promise, that's an expectation you're setting. So go through all of your materials, do that audit, and make that whole list because my guess is there's going to be some adjustments you need to make. Removing claims that don't hold up, that you can't actually fulfill, highlighting claims that you think are important but you didn't find anywhere, and finding a way to provide more proof for those claims that are most important. So I think that claims audit, that's really kind of your first step to getting on the path of aligning your proof with your promises.
Awesome. Love that first step. Audit your own content, figure out what promises you're making. Great stuff. Congrats on another wonderful book, Mel.
Thank you.
I'm super happy for you. And check out storyfuel.co. Get to know Melanie Deziel more, learn more, get the Content Fuel framework, and get a copy of Prove It. It's exactly how modern marketers earn trust right now. So